You spend your entire life defending something that was never really there. Pause. What if I told you that the self you've been protecting, justifying, and armoring against the world is a story you keep telling yourself, a beautiful, elaborate fiction? There's a version of you that exists only in your mind. It has a complete autobiography, a list of achievements and failures, a catalog of wounds. It knows what it likes and what it fears. It has opinions about the weather, strong feelings about how things should be, and a very clear sense of who wronged it in 2011. This version of you is busy, constantly busy. It wakes up May Day and immediately begins the work of maintenance. Checking reflections not just in mirrors, but in other people's eyes. Measuring itself against strangers, defending positions it took years ago, justifying choices, building cases, collecting evidence of its own worthiness. You know this self intimately. It's the one that replays conversations at 2 a.m., rewriting what you should have said. It's the voice that whispers, "They think you're foolish," when you speak up, or "You're not enough," when you rest. It's the curator of your highlight reel and your shame archive. And here's what's strange: you believe it's you. Not just believe. You've built your entire existence around protecting it. You avoid certain people because they threaten this self's narrative. You pursue certain achievements because this self demands validation. You carry grudges because this self was hurt. You chase pleasure and flee pain because this self insists it knows what it needs. Think about the last time someone criticized you. Not your work, not your idea. You, remember that feeling. That immediate tightening in the chest. That rush of heat. The mind suddenly scrambling, reaching for defenses, preparing arguments, pulling up evidence to the contrary. The way hours or even days afterward, you're still rehashing it, still building your case, still feeling that sting. That's the self defending itself. But here's the question that changes everything. What exactly is being defended? If you trace that feeling back to its source, if you really examine what feels threatened in that moment, you'll find something extraordinary. You'll find that there's nothing solid there, no actual thing being attacked, just a collection of thoughts, memories, and stories all held together by a kind of invisible thread we call identity. The self you're defending is like a nation's borders on a map. We look at the map and we see clear lines. This is France. This is Germany. This is Spain. The lines feel real. People have died defending them. Wars have been fought over inches. But then you stand on the actual earth, where the border is supposed to be, and there's just ground, grass, trees, wind. No line appears in the dirt. The border exists only because we agree it does, only because we've drawn it in our collective imagination and decided to make it matter. Yourself is the same. There's no actual boundary where you end and the world begins. No solid, unchanging essence that is definitively you. Just a flowing, shifting process of experience, thoughts arising and dissolving, sensations coming and going, stories being told and retold, all of it moving, all of it temporary, all of it empty of any permanent substance. And yet you defend it like it's everything. You organize your entire life around maintaining this fiction. You choose relationships that confirm your story. You avoid experiences that might challenge it. You grasp at achievements that seem to solidify it. You run from failures that might dissolve it. This is exhausting, not just physically, spiritually. There's a deep tiredness that comes from trying to hold together something that was never meant to be solid. Like trying to build a house out of water, like trying to pin down the wind. The Sufis have a teaching. They say the ego is like a tyrant who's convinced the kingdom that he's the rightful king. He rules through fear and control. He tells everyone what to do. He demands constant tribute attention, validation, achievement, pleasure. And everyone bows to him because they've forgotten there was ever anything else. But the tyrant is terrified because deep down, beneath all the armor and noise, he knows something he's not real. He's just a pattern, a habit, a collection of thoughts that learned to call itself I, and convinced you it was in charge. And the exhausting part, the truly exhausting part, is that you can't defend something that isn't real without making yourself smaller. Every time you protect this fictional self, you have to contract, pull back, put up walls. Say no to experiences that might expand you beyond your story. Every defense is a constriction. Every justification is a limitation. The irony is profound. The more you defend yourself, the less alive you become. You become a curator instead of a creator, a guard instead of an explorer. You stop living and start managing. Stop being and start performing. And somewhere deep inside, beneath all the noise, there's a knowing, a quiet voice that whispers, this isn't it. This isn't who I really am. Most people ignore that voice. It's easier to keep building the fortress. Easier to keep defending the borders. Easier to stay in the familiar prison of self than to step into the unknown freedom of what lies beyond. But you're here, reading this, which means some part of you is ready to ask the question that changes everything. If the self I'm defending isn't real, then what is? Here's what's real. The awareness that's reading these words right now. Not the thoughts you're having about the words. Not the judgments forming about whether you agree or disagree. Not the self-image reacting to the ideas, but the simple, open, effortless awareness that all of that appears within. That is what's real. And it's not a thing. It's not an object you can grasp or defend. It's more like space, like the sky, like the canvas behind a painting. Try something with me. Stop for a moment and notice that you're thinking. Don't change the thoughts. Don't try to stop them. Just notice there are thoughts happening. Now ask yourself, who is noticing the thoughts? Is it another thought? If so, who's noticing that thought? If you trace this back, you'll arrive somewhere unexpected. You'll find that there's a presence and awareness that exists prior to all thought. Before the thinking starts, before the self-story begins, before the name, the history, the identity. That awareness has been here your entire life. It was here when you were 5 years old, before you knew anything about who you were supposed to be. It was here during your first heartbreak, watching the pain move through. It's here now, reading these words, completely unchanged despite all the years and experiences that seem to have happened to you. The Zen masters call it your original face, the one you had before your parents were born. It's not religious. It's not mystical. It's the most ordinary thing in the world. So ordinary we overlook it constantly, like fish overlooking water. This awareness doesn't need defending. It can't be threatened. It can't be insulted. It doesn't improve with success or diminish with failure. It doesn't age. It doesn't become more or less worthy based on what happens in your life. It simply is. And here's what transforms everything You are not the self. You are the awareness in which the self appears. Read that again. You are not the character in the story. You are the awareness reading the story. This changes everything because suddenly, the whole exhausting project of self-defense becomes optional. Unnecessary. You don't need to protect what can't be harmed. You don't need to justify what needs no justification. You don't need to improve what is already whole. Think of it like this. Imagine you're watching a movie. A character on screen is having a terrible day. Everything's going wrong. They're being criticized, rejected, humiliated. And as you watch, you feel for them. You empathize, but you're not reaching for a weapon to defend them. You're not having an identity crisis because they're struggling. You remain the awareness watching the screen, completely untouched by the drama playing out before you. This is your relationship to your own life when you wake up to what's real. The character, the self, can still have experiences, still have preferences, still engage with the world. But you, the awareness, remain free, spacious, undefended. The mystics throughout history have pointed to this in 1,000 ways. The Sufis say, "Die before you die," not literally, but die to the false self. Let the ego structure collapse. Stop defending the fiction and discover that what you actually are cannot die because it was never born. Jesus said, lose your life to find it. Lose the small, defended, separate self. And find the vast, open, undivided awareness that you've always been. The Buddhists call it anatta, no self. Not that you don't exist, but that the solid, separate self you've been imagining is empty. And in that emptiness is the most profound freedom. Here's how this lands in ordinary life. You're at dinner. Someone says something that would normally trigger that defensive reaction, that tightening, that need to correct them, to be seen properly, to defend your position. But this time there's a gap, a space between the comment and your reaction. And in that space you notice, oh, there's the self feeling threatened. And just in that noticing, just in seeing the pattern, as a pattern something loosens. You don't have to fight it. Don't have to fix it. Don't have to become some perfectly egoless being. You just see it clearly. And in that seeing, you're no longer completely identified with it. No longer totally believing it. You're the awareness watching the self, not the self trying to defend itself. This is freedom. Not the freedom to always get what you want. Not the freedom from having preferences or opinions or personality. But freedom from the tyranny of believing that the small, defended self is all you are. From this place, life becomes lighter, not because problems disappear, but because you're no longer adding the weight of self-defense to every situation. No longer layering your identity onto every experience. No longer making everything about the maintenance of a fictional character. Think about how much energy goes into that maintenance. Checking how you're being perceived. Managing your reputation. Making sure people understand you correctly. Replaying conversations to ensure you presented yourself properly. Building cases for your choices. Collecting evidence of your worth. It's exhausting, and it's all optional. When you rest as awareness instead of contracting as self, there's a natural ease. Things still happen. You still respond. You still have preferences and make choices. But there's no one separate trying to control it all. No defended territory, no fortress to maintain. The Persian poet Rumi wrote, Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. That field is awareness. It's the space before judgment, before self, before the story starts. And it's always here, right now, beneath the thinking, behind the defending, prior to the whole elaborate construction of me. You don't have to find it. You just have to stop overlooking it. So how do you actually live from this understanding? Because it's one thing to read about awareness, to have a conceptual understanding that the self is constructed. It's another thing entirely to embody it, to live from that place, to let it change how you move through your days. The answer isn't what most people expect. You don't need a 10-step program. You don't need to become someone different. You don't need to achieve some special state or have a dramatic awakening experience. You just need to practice seeing what's actually happening, seeing the patterns as patterns, seeing the self as self, not as solid truth. Let me give you something practical. Throughout your day, there are moments when the defended self activates. You know these moments intimately. Someone doesn't text back and suddenly there's anxiety. Someone criticizes your work and suddenly there's hurt and anger. You don't get the recognition you wanted and suddenly there's resentment. These are portals, not problems to fix, not failures to overcome, portals into seeing. The usual response is to either act out the pattern, defend, justify, attack, withdraw, or to try to transcend it, to rise above, to be spiritual about it. Both approaches keep the pattern alive because both are still operating from the assumption that the self is real and needs to be managed. There's a third way simple seeing. Next time you feel that defensive contraction, try this. Stop. Don't react. Don't try to fix it. Just feel where it lives in your body. Is it in your chest, your throat, your stomach? Feel the actual sensation without the story. Then notice the thoughts that come with it, the justifications, the defenses, the reruns of past events, the rehearsals of future conversations. Notice them as thoughts, not as truth, just as mental activity arising in awareness. There's the thought that I need to defend myself. There's the thought that I'm not good enough. There's the thought that they don't understand. You're not trying to stop the thoughts, not trying to replace them with positive ones, not trying to transcend them, just seeing them clearly, naming them, recognizing them as patterns of mental activity rather than objective reality. And then, and this is crucial, notice that there's an awareness noticing all of this. An awareness that isn't caught in the pattern. That isn't threatened by the criticism. That doesn't need defending because it was never under attack. You're that awareness. Not the defended self trying to become more aware, but awareness itself watching the self do its dance. This is so simple, it's almost disappointing. We want something more dramatic. Some technique that will finally fix us. Some practice that will make the self dissolve forever in a flash of light. But awakening isn't like that. It's more like remembering something you've always known. Like suddenly recognizing you've been looking at a two-dimensional image when reality has been three-dimensional all along. The Zen teacher Charlotte Joko Beck said, "Practice is about seeing through the illusion that we must be busy all the time, not busy with activity, but busy with self-maintenance, busy defending, improving, managing, protecting the fictional character we think we are. What if you could stop being busy with that? Not by achieving some perfect state, but by simply seeing the pattern clearly enough that it loosens its grip. Here's another practice. Take a simple daily experience. Washing dishes, walking to your car, drinking coffee, something mundane. Usually, even in these moments, the self is busy, planning, rehearsing, judging, maintaining its story. The mind is anywhere but here. But what if you brought your full attention to the actual experience? Not thinking about washing the dishes, but feeling the warm water, hearing the sound of dishes touching, noticing the play of light on soap bubbles, being completely present to the sensory reality of this moment. When you do this, something interesting happens. The self goes quiet, because the self lives in abstraction and thoughts about the past and future, in stories about who you are and how things should be. When you drop into direct experience, prior to thought, the self has nothing to grip, and in that moment you're free. Not free from your life, free within it, free to experience it directly without the constant mediation of the self-story. This isn't about becoming mindful so you can be a better version of the self. It's not self-improvement. It's self-seeing. Seeing through the self to what's actually real. Do this enough, bring awareness to the patterns, feel the sensations without the story. Notice the space between thoughts and something shifts. Not because you've built a better self, but because you've stopped believing the self is all you are. You begin to rest more naturally as awareness, as the space in which life happens, rather than the character trying to control it all. And from that place, life doesn't become perfect, but it becomes workable, light, interesting. Even the difficult moments have a kind of clarity to them, because you're not adding the extra layer of self-defense onto everything. The Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh taught, the miracle is not to walk on water. The miracle is to walk on the earth, to be fully here, fully present, not defended against this moment, not somewhere else in your mind, maintaining your self-image, just here, aware, open. This is what's real, not the defended fortress, not the elaborate story, not the character who needs constant validation and protection, but the simple, vast, ever-present awareness that watches it all with a kind of infinite patience. You don't have to earn access to this. You don't have to become worthy of it. You don't have to perfect yourself first. You already are it. You're just practicing seeing clearly enough to remember. There's a Sufi story about a seeker who traveled the world searching for truth. He climbed mountains, studied with masters, practiced meditation in caves, performed rituals in temples, read every sacred text, tried every technique. Year after year, searching, seeking, always convinced that enlightenment was just beyond the next practice, the next teaching, the next experience. Finally, exhausted and defeated, he returned home. He walked through his own door, sat in his own chair, looked out his own window at the tree he'd seen 1,000 times before. And suddenly he saw it. Truth had never been hiding. He'd been looking past it his entire life, looking past the simple, obvious, ever-present reality in search of something more special, more elaborate, more worthy of his seeking. This is where most of us lie, looking past what's real in defense of what's imagined. You are not the story you've been defending. You're not the collection of achievements and failures, not the catalog of wounds and victories. not the carefully constructed image you present to the world, not the voice in your head narrating your life. You're the awareness in which all of that appears. And that awareness has never needed defending because it's never been threatened, never been harmed, never been less than whole. This isn't philosophy. It's not belief. It's direct recognition of what's always been true. Right now, as you read these words, notice there's an awareness here. Not thinking, not analyzing, just aware. Open, present. Unchanged by whatever thoughts or feelings are passing through. That's who you are. Not who you'll become when you finally get it right. Not who you were before everything went wrong, but who you are right now beneath the story prior to the defense. The defended self will want to make this complicated. It'll want to turn this into a project. Another thing to achieve. Another version of self-improvement. Okay? So now I need to become someone who lives as awareness. Let me defend that new identity. But you can't defend your way into freedom. You can only see clearly enough to stop defending. And that seeing is available in any moment, not just in perfect conditions, but here, now, in the middle of ordinary life. When someone criticizes you and that familiar tightening happens, there's awareness noticing the tightening. When you don't get what you want and disappointment arises, there's awareness noticing the disappointment. When you succeed and pride swells up, there's awareness noticing the pride. You're not trying to get rid of any of it, not trying to transcend being human, just noticing, seeing. Recognizing that all of it, the whole play of experience, is happening within awareness. And you are that awareness, not the temporary contents passing through. This understanding doesn't make you perfect. It makes you free. Free to be human without being imprisoned by the story of who you think you should be. Free to have preferences without defending them as ultimate truth. Free to have personality without mistaking it for your essential nature. Free to live without the exhausting weight of constant self-maintenance. Think about what becomes possible when you're not spending all your energy defending a fiction. You can actually listen to someone without preparing your rebuttal. You can make mistakes without your entire identity crumbling. You can be criticized without needing to immediately justify yourself. You can succeed without grasping at it to prove your worth. You can fail without it meaning something ultimate about who you can live, not perform, not manage, not curate. Just live, openly, vulnerably, honestly, without the armor. The Persian poet Hafez wrote, "I wish I could show you, when you are lonely or in darkness, the astonishing light of your own being. That light has been here all along, not hidden, not far away, not requiring years of practice to access, just overlooked, mistaken for something ordinary when it's the most extraordinary thing there is. You are that light, not the defended self standing in the light trying to shine brighter than others, but the light itself, the awareness, the open, spacious, ever-present consciousness in which the entire play of life unfolds. And from that place, nothing needs to be different. The self can still do its dance, can still have opinions and preferences and personality, but you're no longer imprisoned by it, no longer believing it's all you are, no longer organizing your entire existence around defending it. So here's the invitation. Stop defending, not as a practice, not as a technique, but as a simple recognition that there's nothing to defend. The self you've been protecting is like a shadow. Chase it and it runs. Fight it and it persists. Defend it and it demands more defense. But turn toward the light, turn toward the awareness that's prior to the shadow, and the whole problem dissolves. Not because you've solved it, but because you've seen through it. You don't need to be more. You don't need to be better. You don't need to finally get your story perfect. You need to remember what you are beneath the story. And that remembering is happening right now. In this moment. In the simple awareness reading these words. In the space between thoughts. In the breath moving through your body. In the ordinary miracle of being aware of being aware. The defended self will dissolve one day. It will. All stories end. But what you actually are, this awareness, this presence, this simple beingness has never begun and will never end. It's here now. It's always been here. It's you. Not the you've been defending, but the you that's real. Welcome home. In the space between breaths, you'll find what you've been seeking. In the silence between thoughts, you'll discover what you've always been. Nothing to defend. Just this, just here, just now. Real.